Welcome to season 2
of the Coco Lesa podcast.
It's real hip hop music from the soul, y'all.
From the soul. It always start with loving, don't it? That we always end up fighting, but we could fall off long as we get back to riding, homie. You the only one I see.
You like that one?
What's going on, family?
Hello.
How's everybody doing? Welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode of the Coco Lesa podcast.
They hear it in the intro. So a couple announcements, couple call outs this week, guys. So we got a lot going on right now, which is why this episode is late, so apologies for that. Working on so much. So 2 websites just came out that we would love if you guys checked out.
That we're super excited about. The HOHcollective.com, you can Google it. And that is, we're building right now. Yeah. Here's what we're building. What we do so much on the show is communicating, right? Mm-hmm. It's something that we're trying to help people with is to build confidence, to be more capable, stronger, to just enjoy the quality of your life a bit better. How do you do that? How do we do that? Through communication. And so we're doing some online courses to help people improve their communication, their problem solving, and their negotiating skills. And the best thing is, it's free.
It most certainly is free. And so if you check out our website, the HOHcollective.com, you can get signed up for our courses, free giveaways, merchandising, all the things that we've been putting together and working so hard on, and that we're fighting to roll out.
So it's super appreciate your support.
And we appreciate how much love we get on social from everybody. So a lot of new things coming out to check on the site. We're going to be emailing everybody with weekly updates on all the things that's going on and that we're working on, and that you have access to. Also, shout out to the Keto brothers, right?
The Keto Island Boys.
Keto Island Boys. Another Pacifica podcast.
Which is dope.
It is super dope, which found us. We found them. We're connected now. We got to link up to do a food episode. So really appreciate the love and the support from other Pacifica podcasters. Girafondo. Also, to our new listener out in Seattle, very happy and proud to be able to teach you what Macca's is. So.
Wait, just to touch on the Keto boys, I find it very interesting because carb is such a heavy part of our my diet. It's like, so just my knowledge of keto, just how do you cut out the kalo?
How do you cut out the kalo?
What?
How do you cut out the rice?
But I know a few islanders that actually
they've
keto.
had super dope results with it.
Yeah, that's like friends I know that have done it. So maybe it's time to jump on board.
Yeah, might check that out. Actually, realistically, you know. So check them out, Keto Island Boys. If you follow us on Twitter, you can see them, you can see us. And we're definitely going to link up and make that collab happen. So thank you guys for that. Thank you for our new followers. Thank you for everybody that's been following.
Let's jump into today's episode.
Pretty big one. All of our episodes are pretty big, just because the stuff that we handle culturally. But we're talking faith. We're full on talking faith. And how do you talk brown culture? How do you talk Pacifica culture? How do you talk island culture without talking faith? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to address and come at from different angles, we're going to talk about how we interact with faith as a people. Yeah? We're going to talk about what is faith. Yeah?
How faith is influenced our cultures, our traditions.
That's still a part of the first part, right? But the second part is breaking down actually what is faith, right? And then for the third part, I guess we can talk about where we are with it and what
how
that
we
affects.
integrate faith into our own lives.
Yeah. And we have a couple different comments on that. So it's so funny because I feel like I say this every episode depending on what we're talking about. But I think a central theme in our culture, and that's brown culture, no matter which aspect of that you are, if you're black, if you're Spanish, if you're Puerto Rican, if you're Pacific, if you're Samoan, if you're Tongan, for us, we have this belief that nobody does things or understands things the way we do. Like, you don't do family the way we do family. Like, you like food, but you don't do food the way we do. Like, you love God, but you don't love God the way we love God, you know? and so it's like we have special ownership over all these topics. And faith is one of those things that's a very controversial conversation in our community because it touches every aspect of our community, either negatively or positively. And it's one that people have a lot of, you know, so
they have a lot of, like, when you talk about it, they feel very, like, their backs are up against the wall. Like, that's how they feel, like you're coming at them a certain way.
I think so. We have definitely had backlash because of the things that we talk about in our community. And something that's a core part of our community is disapproval.
Well, heavy criticism.
Heavy criticism, right? Oh, I hate to say it. I don't want to say it. Like, it's very hard. Okay, so listen, right? A lot of the way we pass language is through music, right? What are almost all Samoan songs? Hymns, dog, hymns. How you stalled on that answer? I'm not even a Samoan here. Wowzers.
I was thinking, like...
No,
rappers? Are they rappers? Like, are you talking about
you
rappers?
are such a bad Samoan. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Goodness. Listen, I haven't been to church in a long ass time. I don't know what these hymns are about.
And
now.
all of your family just frowned. But even when I was I'm a recovering Mormon, right? But even when I was in a Mormon, and you know, Tongan ward all day, gang. No jokes. So much of our Tongan songs are hymns as well, you know? Yeah. And so, even though faith is very recent in terms of our culture, in terms of Christianity, it's so deeply intertwined with what it means to be Pacifica.
Yeah.
So much so that it's almost erased everything that came before it. Mm-hmm. Look how deeply invested Pacific Islanders are in the Mormon community. Yeah. In the Christian community. Like, people of color, it doesn't matter what faith they subscribe to. When they do, they go hard.
They do.
Whether it be Muslims or, like...
I personally, like, if you subscribe to Christian beliefs... That's completely fine. It's not an issue to me what your beliefs are. You're entitled to them. But
it's so funny, right? Because Christianity is dominant in our community among the faiths. And
that's what I take issue with.
It's dominant in our community among the faiths. Then, on top of that, there's a divide between Christians and Mormons, who are technically the same thing, but viewed very differently in different practices, right? But then, of Muslims coming into play. And we have Buddhists, but then we have people also who are dipping back into our original faiths. Polytheism, pre-Christianity, you know what I mean? But again, originally we were going to do today's episode on silence because this is a conversation that doesn't get had. Yeah. Because it's so controversial. And the reason it's so controversial, I say all the time, is because it's built on beliefs. And when it comes to beliefs, the reason they're so dangerous is because it doesn't matter who feels they're right or wrong. It's valid because it's your belief. Mm-hmm. How can somebody tell you what to believe and what, even though we do it all the time, you're wrong for... And here's the funny part that makes it so wild for us is my main problem with mass religion has never been the act of faith. It's always been that attitude of, if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. Yeah. And you're going to burn. And that's what makes all of this such a wild discussion, right? Because we are so adamant as a people, not even just with faith, where if you don't believe what I believe, you're wrong. Uh-huh. And then you bring God into the mix, and that's a wild conversation, G.
I just take issue with just how heavily Christianity has influenced our traditions and our cultures. Like, it's like we just ignore the fact that colonization, like a lot of places in the world, they're taking over the land. Like colonization came out of the guise of like
one of my favorite sayings, Bishop Desmond Tutu, right? He said, when the missionaries came to Africa,
we had the land
and they had the Bibles. We closed our eyes and said, let us pray. And when we opened them, we had the Bibles and they had the land.
And now we so heavily attach ourselves.
And I know a lot of older islanders that say, oh yeah, true, and still hit that church super hard. Like there's a disconnect with the reality of a statement and how it affects. And I mean, there's a lot of places where you're not a proper islander if you don't believe in God, if you don't go to church. Like White Sunday is a big deal.
I know, but never mind that you get your lines wrong and you get hiding after. Like, it's like that whole story you were telling about your when you were teaching about, and you were like, does it make me a good person? And I'm at church every Sunday. But
so a conversation that I had with my students, right? Because I'm always viewed as the extreme one and the one that's so stepping away from my culture. But so listen, the reason I had to have this conversation is because the majority of my demographic for my students is my people. It's Maori, yeah. And so it's big for us too, the faith. You know what I mean? And I also had a good cross section of Samoan students and Tongan students, and we were talking about perception versus reality. And I wrote an entire chapter in my book on Facebook and church.
She's just pretty.
Right? And a lot of our community is about appearances, right? And so I said, what makes a person a good person or a bad person, right? A lot of our community is like, if you're at church every Sunday, you're a good person. You're doing the right thing. They overlook the fact that you're beating your wife and your kids, or that you stole from this person, because you're in church. It's okay. But if you're going to work every day and taking care of your family and your kids are happy and healthy, but you're not in church, something must be wrong with you.
Yeah.
And that's very real in our community too, and the things that people try and tell. So I asked her before we started this episode if it was okay if we mentioned her, right? Because a perfect person for this conversation is on the TL, part of Poly Twitter, Island Breezy. And the reason I say that is because she's been fighting a very real, very hard fight with cancer. And something she just popped off on and said is, if one more person tells me have faith, you know what I mean? Like, what? It's so insulting, it's so disrespectful.
Yeah.
What do you think I've been doing this entire time?
Even prior, she probably was at church.
Of course. And so it's so rude and disrespectful to suggest to someone that the way to handle their problem and make it through what they're going through, God's the only answer.
Oh Lord, the amount of times I've heard pray.
Listen, I remember when we were with your family in the beginning. Your sister had a mean test coming up, and she was studying and she was ready. But they felt she needed a pep talk, and the pep talk was, if it gets hard, just pray. And that gets used as a crutch for a lot of things. Instead of I don't know, instead of let's find the answer together.
It's
just pray on it. And I think that was one of my guys, one of my students. He and I started in a weird place, but we came to a beautiful place. And the reason we started in a weird place is because he was very active and very heavy in the church. And he didn't like that I cursed in my classroom, and things like that. But this is a man, and this is not me, this is a man who told me, you changed my life. First time he ever finished a course, and made him think about what he wanted for his future and the way he treated his family, and what he was teaching and passing on to his children. So he was super heavy and super active in the church and didn't have any of those things and didn't think about any of those things. But coming to our classroom gave him that. And I'm not knocking down faith, because I'm a person of tremendous faith. But I think we need to have a conversation about what we're believing in. You can be spiritual and not be religious.
Yeah.
And the reason I believe in being spiritual and not religious is because being spiritual is about being devoted to your higher power. Being religious is about being devoted to the organization.
Facts.
And that's why I think it's so important for us to talk about what is faith. What is faith? Because if you...
No, but I feel like there is a... Like... The thing for me is... I want to revert back...
To our traditions.
Yeah, to before Christianity came, to before colonization came. I want there to be recognition. And look, even Moana, like, you watch Moana and...
all the time, and don't... Listen, I'm Pele Gang all day. Our daughter is named after Mohuaka, the Maori goddess of fire, Mohuakia. But anyway...
And, like, even through stories that your parents tell you growing up, you can see... like tradition, like the old traditions lingering through their stories. Like, that's what I want there to be, like, recognition.
That's very big for us in our family, right? Being closer to the original faith that we held as a people, what brought us strength in the origin and the value of who we are. Those stories exist for a reason about Maui and the voyaging and all of those things, and that's kind of what I think you're kicking it back to.
Yeah, but I feel like there definitely is a place for Christianity. Like, I'm not gonna kick you down if you find hope and strength in...
And so here's the
Jesus,
conversation,
you know what
right?
I mean?
Here's the real thing that we're saying. For us, it's okay to be any faith, and that's something that's not okay in our community. It's not okay to believe other than the whole believes, and we don't subscribe to that. We think there is beauty in anything that gives you strength and builds you up and helps you to be a better person, as long as it doesn't hurt other people. But we are not going to condemn anyone for loving and believing in things that make them feel better and stronger as an individual. And it doesn't matter if that's Christianity, Mormonism, Judaism, even though they don't want us. Anyway, Islam, you know what I mean? We're not knocking faith. That's not what this is about. And so I think this is
more of an appreciation of all faiths.
Right.
And something that we should have inclusion in our cultures.
And that's what we try for. And so here's something I was having a conversation about this week in my Uber. I said, the rough part about the church and the community is that, one, lack of inclusion, which we've just covered, but two, it's the teaching that people are wrong if they're not doing what you're doing or believing what you're believing. And for people who believe so strongly, that naturally gets taken to extremes. And so your grandmother is not trying to belittle you or take you down. She's trying to save you. She really believes you're going to go to hell if you don't do these things. But it destroys the experience of something that's meant to be beautiful because it warps and changes all these positive things into negatives. There's so many better ways to handle faith, and we use faith against each other as a weapon, and that's what I don't want. So my question is, and I want you to talk about this, not me.
Okay.
What is faith to you? In a positive way, in a negative way, what is faith to you?
I'm not wholly 100% sure I even know the answer to that question. Like, I grew up, we were Catholic, then we were we were Catholic, Mormon, Ethics, Efakasa, for those who don't know, and we were Methodists. So we, like, jumped around
Because your mom was on her own journey.
Yeah, trying to find
her faith in the one that worked for her.
And she settled.
And you naturally have to be with what she is. Yeah, so you went on that journey.
And she settled on Mormonism. She really found a place there. But even now, she's shifting to something different because it's just...
there was disagreements with the church. She had real valid disagreements with the way the church was run. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that happens to people. It was just a lack of conversation that we're this now that messed everybody up. But go ahead.
So her reasoning for moving away from Mormonism was that she works with the government and she sees a lot of our own people, Pacifica people, in poverty. They come to her work for help, for rent, because they need to pay their rent, because they don't have food, because they don't have this. And she looks at their budget and she sees how much of their money has gone to tithing, and she's like, you literally are not surviving, and this is the amount you're going to give to tithing.
And that's so much of our church culture and community in life as well, that is greedy to hold on the money rather than give it to the church. But how much of what's given to the church
is coming back to
the community? And so that has challenged
her issue.
A lot of people's faith, right? So nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with taking a spiritual journey. There's nothing wrong with taking the time to figure out what faith works for you and where that takes you, because it's a journey we should all take. It's one that I went on for a long time, and it took me a long time.
And we probably would still be on it even after this. It's
to find what was right for me. And so I guess my way of answering that question, what is faith to me? There's a movie, and the movie is called Serenity. And it's actually not about faith, it's a sci-fi movie. But the funny thing about Serenity is there's a preacher in the movie. And the lead character is not a religious man, but him and this preacher are very close. And the preacher is about to die, and a lot of the preacher's people are dead. And the preacher says, you have to have faith. And the guy says to the preacher, that's a long wait on a train that doesn't come. And the preacher says to him, why do you always think I'm talking about God? You need to have faith in you and the people around you. And so for me, faith is the act of believing for strength and for positivity, not necessarily in any one God or any one higher power. And it has nothing to do with other people's faith. Faith is about you and your place with your power.
So that's your understanding of faith.
Faith is about my journey with my higher power, which doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. About faith. A question years ago about faith, because they were trying out a new faith, and people were very unaccepting of it in their life. And I gave a response. Oh, so this is a conversation that I had years ago. When somebody was asking me, should I keep believing in my faith because nobody else believes in it and they're not supportive? And my reply was, on the topic of religion, faith is something that's deeply personal, which you shouldn't be looking for support from others on anyway. Not even in the form of acceptance. Because the crazy thing is that Christians and atheists and tons of people never realize is everyone worships differently. And there's no wrong way to share a bond with your God unless it brings harms to others. I don't recommend my Bible to other people. I don't teach them about my faith or my religion or prayers. Not because I don't believe in it, but because I'm not trying to convert. What I believe is none of their business, and I don't want to hear their thoughts on what gives me strength.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And what really stood out to me was we all worship differently.
We do. I think that's one of the biggest parts of this conversation that no one ever has. We worship differently. I've sat in the same church every Sunday next to the same people and listened to them speak and give their testimonies and realized they all believed in God in a completely different way. And the only reason it wasn't a controversy and didn't come to a head is because no one ever talked about that fact.
Yeah.
I remember when the missionaries were sitting at my table with one of the brothers, they kind of bumped on it a little bit because they were teaching me about the word from the Book of Mormon, and one of the missionaries was talking about how no one ever mentions that Jesus was a prophet, and Jesus is his favorite prophet. And the thing he was leaving out that got the brother a little upset, he was like, yeah, and he was also the Son of God. But it was that little friction.
Yeah.
So we worship the same faith and worship it completely differently. But because we don't talk on that,
yeah.
But that's a big thing.
And that comes into what I wanted to actually talk about in this episode as well was
American Gods.
This is our show. Like we're eagerly waiting for the second season, right?
The funny thing is she's gotten more into it than I did, but anyway. So he introduced me to polytheism. He introduced me to, like, I understood that there were different gods, but at the time I was just kind of stuck on what you knew and all you've been raised with.
Like, kind of like, I don't know if I'm Mormon, I don't know, like...
I am a polytheist. I'm an active polytheist that I have been for a very long time, very proudly. So, yeah, I introduced my wife to it because this is my faith, and yeah.
So, and then we got into watching American Gods.
And until American Gods, the TV show, happened, which we were reluctant to because lack of Native American representation. But until we got into American Gods, she didn't really understand what polytheism was all about, right? Yeah. But American Gods helped her understand that. And the big conversation that she wanted to have, that they play on a lot in American Gods, is that your faith is what you give your time to, your energy to, your effort, your life, your devotion. It's not the words you speak, it's your actions, it's your energy. And so American Gods subscribes to the theory that we as people
have created these new gods.
And the new gods are technology,
media,
and money, because we devote ourselves to these things so heavily. We give them all our time and attention. Even our Bibles are on our phones.
And this kind of ties into what you were saying about we worship differently. We unknowingly sometimes worship things that and we're like...
And that's something that I've always loved about polytheism, because perfection is hard. Mm-hmm. And the desire for perfection creates toxicity, especially because we all have a different form of perfection and what perfection is. And so if you're trying to force somebody to strive towards what you see as perfection, and they're trying to hit what they see as perfection, it's going to explode. Same thing with faith. You're trying to force someone towards what you see as faith, and they're trying to pursue what they see as faith.
Yeah.
Everybody's wrong. Everybody's right.
You know what I find so funny? So, if you guys haven't watched it, it's pretty good. It's very inclusive of, like, almost all religions. Because there's, like, Jesus in there. But it's so funny because there's, like, so many Jesuses. Because everyone worships a different kind of Jesus. It's still Christianity, but they're like, there's like a Mexican Jesus.
And a Chinese Jesus. And like Episcopal Jesus.
And this is very real. Like, this is how we worship today. Like, we all looking at the same Bible, the same freaking...
And interpreting and experiencing it differently, but we never speak on that conversation.
Yeah. Like, I'm Mormon too. But then, if you like were to have...
I'm Mormon and I believe in polygamy. I'm Mormon and I don't. You know?
So it's really interesting. So you guys should check it out if it's like your thing.
So we actually have... But again, this is why it's so important to have the conversation on faith. Because we have like millions of faith and think that we only have a couple.
Yeah. So it just makes me wonder how many different... Like, how many gods we have created in our own faith, and how many... Well, not really like...
Well, even in our community, we create what the Romans called household gods. Because look at the way we're supposed to worship our elders and our seniors. And I'm going to be real. We call it obedience and subservience and respect and honor for the culture. But our seniors and elders in the community expect to be worshipped. What's the quote that I always say that I heard from your family? In Samoan culture, we don't talk, we listen. You're not supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to explore. You're supposed to do what you're told. Your earnings are supposed to go to the elders. Your energy, even your children. We create household gods in Pacifica culture because elders expect to be treated with that same reverence that you give God.
You know, I just want to tell a funny story. There is
You telling it to me or you telling it to them?
To them. Well, you as well, I guess. Like, because you just mentioned even our children. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mom said, if it's a boy, I want the boy. I want to take him to Samoa, let him grow up there. And I was like, no. You were like, no. But then we went, but I know in my culture, like I know that there have been many, many times in our families
where children are
given out,
but this is even for me too. It's just different. We fostering, but yeah, you know.
And then we went to the my grandma's funeral, and the grandson had a.
All right, so listen. I'll tell her from this part because this is me. So even in my family, we have experiences where one child is raised by another portion of family. You give it, yeah, but we do it differently, same way, right? So we're at her grandmother's funeral, and the oldest grandson is up on stage, and he's talking about his life and his experience with his grandmother. And he said, I was the firstborn, and Grandma wanted me, so... And he just shrugged, and it was him passing over it so casually that kind of made it hit me. But I turned to the side, I tapped her, I was like, nigga, did he just say what I think he said? And yeah, when he was born... He was his mom and dad's first child, and his grandmother wanted him, so they gave him up, and she raised him.
Yeah, and I was pregnant at the time. I was heavily pregnant at the time, and you looked over and you were like, huh? Did he just... And it was just so funny because we already had this discussion with our mom about adoption.
Because for us, when you foster... In my culture, when you foster a child, it's an agreement between two families, and a child is either traded or you raise two children together with a third family. It's so that they can be taught a central set of beliefs that ties all the families together. But it's different in Samoan culture, and it's for different reasons. So it kind of messed me up when it hit me. But even that, who do you give in Game of Thrones? Who do they give the babies to? The White Walkers. They sacrifice. Where in biblical history, where do they give children for sacrifice? To God, to appease the God. Yeah. You know what I mean? On the altar. So I don't even...
I mean, that whole last story about who was to be sacrificed, that caused a whole ass rift in Muslim and Islam.
So that's another thing that we don't acknowledge is how much our elders expect to be treated in a godly capacity and expect to be worshipped and venerated. And if you do talk about that, and if you don't agree with that, well, you don't understand Pacifica or Samoan or Tongan culture. And but meanwhile, the head of my church is driving a Benz.
I know, right, with a freaking 6-bedroom house while I'm living in a shack.
And everybody in my family is starving and we all work. And so again, this is not knocking faith, but these conversations are what turns people off of and away from faith. And we have to have these conversations in order to correct a lot of these things in our community. It's the only way they get better, and that's so much of why we do what we do. So obviously this is going to have a lot of... This episode is going to be wild to see what people say about this, but that's...
And it's crazy that we haven't done an episode like this before.
Yeah, well, listen, but that's a part of... This is the faith conversation.
Yeah.
This is the faith conversation.
So just to reiterate, we're not knocking anyone's faith.
We're not. We believe in inclusion and acceptance of all faiths as long as they are not harmful to each other. And
we just wish that our community, our Pacifica community, was more inclusive of our own people's other faiths, if that makes any sense.
Even in our community. So just to keep this to something that's very us, we want inclusion. Yeah. We want love. You know, we want everybody to be free to practice faith the way they believe it and see it in a healthy way.
And I just want to say that in the beginning of this episode, I wasn't very talkative. But that's mostly because, like, culturally, it's hard for me to talk about faith because I grew up so heavily indoctrinated in a...
Which is funny because we were going to do a whole episode on silence.
Yeah.
Which
so I was still deciding at the very beginning, like, is this something I really want to, you know, like,
which is funny because you suggested the topic for this episode.
I did, because I feel like it was a very needed topic. And, like, even now, I'm still, like, trying to figure out where I am and stuff. And that's going to be a journey.
But if we don't talk about it, how can we take the journey? How can we move forward on it? And that's why we have so many of the conversations we have, guys. It's not to shake things up. It's not to ruffle feathers. It's to create conversations that we need to have in our community that don't happen. Like, of all the conversations that happen on Poly Twitter, as wild as they are, as rough as they are, I've never seen one about faith. Well, we have a lot of racial conversations.
No, I've never seen one that was like inclusive, like of
facts. I've seen people slander
and be like hurl Bible verses
and insults, yes,
as like a means to insult and stuff. Or like,
and so again, because so many people in our conversation, and again, not to plug myself, but please, guys, for our community, for us as a people, check out the e-course. Let me help you guys break down communication, because I've seen so many people in our community try to start and have these conversations from a rational place.
Yeah.
And it turns to, I always say, Lonnie, look at the conversation she tried to have and started getting death threats.
Yeah.
Death threats from members of her own community. Lonnie went. Church members of the community. Death threats for speaking out about what she was speaking out against. Not because she was wrong, not because it wasn't true, but because people disagreed with it.
Yeah.
We got to have these conversations, guys. Check us out, HOHcollective.com. Thank you for following us. We love and appreciate you for being with us, guys.
Thank you guys for being here.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. We hope it sparked some meaningful conversations.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.